We've all been there. You're sitting at your desk, just staring at your monitor, and it hits you. That dreaded 3 p.m. wall.
Yeah, the concrete brain.
Exactly. Your brain feels like it's wading through wet concrete. You read the same sentence 4 times and literally none of it registers. Or maybe you know the exact opposite feeling, which is the midnight scroll.
Right. Wired but tired.
Yes. You're lying in bed, you're completely exhausted, but your mind is just racing. You're endlessly swiping through your phone while your brain stubbornly refuses to shut down. And usually we beat ourselves up over this.
We really do. We tell ourselves we just lack discipline,
Right, or we just need another coffee, or we just have to grind it out. But what if I told you that this struggle with focus isn't a lack of discipline at all? It's actually a profound biological mismatch between how we're working and how our bodies are wired. Welcome, listeners, to another My Mind MashUps deep dive where we unravel mysteries, spark curiosity, and make sense of complex ideas together.
It's so important to reframe that guilt right out of the gate, I think. Because when you actually look at the science of chronobiology, you realize your brain is operating exactly as it evolved to. I mean, it's doing its job perfectly. We just aren't listening to the signals it's sending us.
We really aren't, and that's what we're here to do. Every single deep dive we do is fundamentally about 3 things: sparking curiosity, challenging assumptions, and expanding understanding. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you enjoy content that makes you think. So taking all that into account, what's the specific mission for today's deep dive into the source material?
Today, our mission is to break down the incredibly heavy, dense scientific infrastructure of chronobiology and, translate it into everyday language you can actually use.
Yeah.
We're going to explore the genetic clocks ticking inside your cells right now.
Which is wild to think about.
It really is. We'll get into the specific neurochemistry that dictates your creative windows and why your brain absolutely requires strategic pit stops to function. Ultimately, we're looking at how to play your biology like an instrument rather than fighting it like a broken machine.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with something called the BRAC cycle. Now, if you track your sleep with a smartwatch, you probably know that at night we go through these 90 to 120-minute cycles, right? Shifting from deep sleep into REM sleep.
Yeah, the classic sleep architecture.
Right. But I was looking at Nathaniel Kleitman's original research from back in 1963, and it blew my mind. He was a pioneering sleep researcher, and he discovered that this exact same gear shift happens while we're awake. He called it the basic rest activity cycle.
That really is the crucial historical leap. We've been conditioned by modern work culture to assume wakefulness is meant to be run like a single unbroken marathon.
Just push through the whole day.
Right. You wake up, you grind for 8 straight hours, and then you crash. But Kleitman's work proved that this 90 to 120-minute periodicity is a fundamental organizing principle of your central nervous system. That wave doesn't just switch off because the sun came up and you clocked into the office.
So we're riding these waves all day long.
Yep.
What is actually happening in the physical brain during the first part of that cycle? Let's say that first 70 to 90 minutes when you sit down feeling fresh, ready to focus on a big project.
During that ascending phase, your brain enters a state of high cortical arousability. If we were to hook you up to an EEG monitor right then, we'd see a massive dominance of fast-paced beta and gamma waves.
And those are the good ones for work. Right?
Exactly. Those are the frequencies associated with directed attention, analytical thinking, problem solving. Chemically, a tiny cluster of neurons deep in your brainstem called the locus coeruleus wakes up and starts pumping out a cocktail of norepinephrine, dopamine, and glutamate.
That sounds like a serious chemical boost.
It's the ultimate focus blend. This specific cocktail activates what neuroscientists call the task-positive network. It essentially turns up the signal of whatever you're focusing on and dials down the background noise.
It's like your brain is a race car firing on all cylinders. But we all know that feeling right around the 90-minute mark. You hit that wall, pushing past it feels like dragging a heavyweight. Wait, if this trough is just routine maintenance like the sources suggest, why does it feel so agonizing? Because at 3 p.m., I don't feel like I'm clearing waste. I feel like my brain has completely shut off and I'm failing at my job.
It feels agonizing because you're actively fighting a biological requirement. The final 15 to 20 minutes of the BRAC cycle is the trough. Your brain waves physically shift down into slower alpha and theta frequencies. You're entering a parasympathetic rest and digest state.
So the race car is being forced to slow down.
Exactly. Think about that high-intensity focus you just sustained. It produces metabolic waste products in the brain. It's like the exhaust from that race car engine. This trough is the non-negotiable micro window your brain needs to clear out that metabolic waste and replenish its neurotransmitter stores.
So we shouldn't be pushing through it.
Not at all. When you try to force high-level focus during this trough, it hurts because the engine is choked with exhaust and out of fuel. It's not a weakness, it's a necessary pit stop.
I really love that reframing. You aren't losing your edge. Your brain is literally taking out the trash and refueling.
What's fascinating here is that this isn't just some modern human quirk brought on by office work. It's a deeply conserved evolutionary mechanism. If we look at comparative biology, infants have shorter 50-minute cycles that dictate their immediate need for frequent feeding and waking.
Wow, even infants have it.
Yep. And if you look at rats and mice, they have precise 90 to 100-minute cycles that intrinsically link their eating habits, their body temperature fluctuations, and their movement. It's a fundamental rhythm of mammalian life that we are actively ignoring.
It fundamentally changes how you view your entire workday. You start looking for the waves instead of just staring at the clock. If this is resonating, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next deep dive. Now, let's zoom in from the whole brain down to the cellular level. So you've got this 90-minute wave pacing our focus, but there's an overarching master schedule too.
Yeah.
I was reading about the suprachiasmatic nucleus, the SCN. It's basically the body's master pacemaker deep in the hypothalamus, right?
That's right. The SCN is the conductor of the whole biological orchestra. But the way it keeps time is what's truly incredible. The SCN doesn't see images like the rest of your visual system. It doesn't care about shapes or colors in the traditional sense.
It's just looking for light.
Exactly. It measures ambient light using specialized cells in your eyes called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, or iPRGCs. And these cells contain a very specific photopigment called melanopsin.
Here's where it gets really interesting. This light system in our eyes isn't just sending brightness updates to our brain, it's physically talking to our DNA. The source material refers to this as a transcription-translation feedback loop. But how does a photon of light actually reach into our cells to do that?
Think of it like a biological domino effect. You have this 24-hour molecular gear train inside your cells. There are proteins, notably CLOCK and BML1, that drive the creation of other genes, specifically the period genes like PER1 and PER2 and cryptochrome genes.
So they build up over the day.
Yes, and when those PER and CRI proteins build up enough, they actually turn back around and inhibit their own creation. It takes about 24 hours for this whole cycle of building up and breaking down to happen.
So it's a self-winding 24-hour clock. Where does the light come in?
When morning light hits that melanopsin in your eye, it tips over the first domino. It triggers the release of neurotransmitters into the SCN. Those neurotransmitters knock into the next set of proteins, starting a rapid chemical cascade. The final domino falls directly on your DNA.
And what does that do?
It specifically causes a massive immediate surge in the transcription of the PER2 gene. That surge of PER2 is what physically resets your biological clock, telling your entire body, down to the cellular level, that the day has officially started.
We all know that staring at our phones or laptops at midnight is bad because of the blue light. But the source material highlighted a study that really puts a terrifying metric on how bad it is. It's not just keeping us awake, it's physically altering that PER2 gene expression in our oral mucosa.
Precisely. The researchers exposed humans to 2 hours of 460 nanometer blue light, the exact peak wavelength of modern screens in the evening. They then measured the expression of the PER2 gene in the cells of their mouths.
And then they found a change.
A massive one. The blue light caused a massive, unnatural spike in PER2 expression. It tricked the DNA into reacting as if the sun had just risen at 11 p.m. But when they exposed people to green light at the same intensity, it didn't trigger that genetic cascade at all.
So staring at your phone in bed is basically lying to your DNA.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, your evening screen time is literally recoding the biological timing in your cells. Chronobiologists call this social jet lag.
Social jet lag, that's a great term.
Even if you haven't moved an inch from your couch, biologically you've flown across multiple time zones. And because you just artificially shifted that PER2 gene expression, you've fundamentally delayed your cognitive peak for the entire following day. You wake up exhausted because your cells think it's still the middle of the night.
That is wild. So we've got this 24-hour genetic clock setting the overarching schedule and the 90-minute waves pacing our focus throughout the day. But a schedule and a rhythm don't mean much if the engine doesn't have any gas. What is the actual neurochemical fuel driving these high-focus peaks and deep troughs? The sources point to 3 main chemical rails: adenosine, cortisol, and melatonin. Let's start with the weight dragging us down, adenosine.
Adenosine is essentially a biological measure of homeostatic sleep pressure. Think of it like ash building up from a fire. As your brain burns ATP for energy throughout the day, adenosine is the byproduct that gets left behind.
So it just accumulates.
It accumulates and binds to specific receptors in the brain, actively inhibiting the cortex and creating a biological drag. The longer you're awake, the more the ash builds up and the heavier that mental gravity feels.
And then we have the SMARC, cortisol. Now, we constantly hear about cortisol in the media as the stress hormone. It's almost always framed as this toxic, inherently bad thing we need to eliminate through meditation and green juice.
Which is a massive, incredibly common misconception. Cortisol is actually the endocrine backbone of your day's entire arousal trajectory. It's secreted in those 90-minute ultradian pulses we talked about earlier. You absolutely need those pulses of cortisol to provide the spark, the necessary arousal for executive function, focus, and flexible thinking.
So it's a Goldilocks situation.
Exactly. It follows an inverted U curve. If you have too little cortisol, you have zero drive. You're lethargic and unmotivated. But if you have way too much, your flexible thinking collapses into rigid panic and anxiety. You need that rhythmic, perfectly timed cortisol spark to get anything meaningful done.
And finally, the gate. Melatonin. Again, most people just think of melatonin as that gummy supplement you buy at the pharmacy when you can't sleep.
Right, but biologically, it's much better understood as a night signal from your circadian system. When it's released naturally by the brain in response to darkness, one of its primary functions is to lower your core body temperature.
I didn't realize it dropped your temperature.
It does, and that drop in temperature physically slows down cerebral processing speed. It's preparing the brain for sleep, yes, but it's also dramatically altering your cognitive state.
So what does this all mean for our actual day-to-day work? Because obviously not all work is the same. Staring at a spreadsheet isn't the same as brainstorming a new marketing campaign. The sources draw a really clear line between precision work and insight work.
This is where we have to look at large-scale brain networks. When you're at the absolute peak of your 90-minute BRA cycle, you've got a fresh cortisol pulse, very low adenosine, high alertness, your executive control network is dominant.
The ECN.
Yes. This is when you're going to excel at precision creativity. Think about writing complex code, drafting a tight logical argument, or doing heavy data analysis. It requires intense, narrow, unforgiving focus.
But then you inevitably hit that 15 to 20-minute trough. You feel a bit foggy, your attention drifts, your inhibitory control drops. That sounds like a terrible time to do anything productive.
It is a terrible time to do precision work. If you try to code during a trough, you're going to make mistakes. But here's the secret. During that trough, your executive control network quiets down and your default mode network takes over.
The DMN.
Right. This is the network that lights up when you're mind-wandering, daydreaming, or taking a shower. Because your rigid inhibitory control is temporarily lowered, your brain is actually in the exact state biologically permissive for insight creativity.
That's the shower thought phenomenon.
Precisely. This is when your brain makes those remote aha associations, connecting to totally unrelated ideas that your highly focused brain would have filtered out as irrelevant noise.
What stands out to you? I want you, the listener, to really think about your day. Are you trying to force precision work when your brain is literally wired for insight? Because I know I've stared at a spreadsheet at 3:30 p.m., getting absolutely nothing done, feeling miserable, when I should have used that mental state to step back and brainstorm bigger picture ideas.
We constantly mismatch the task to our biological state. If you need a massive creative breakthrough, trying to grind it out at your absolute peak alertness, hyped up on 3 coffees, might actually hinder you. Your brain is too strictly focused to allow those weird, diffuse, creative connections to form.
So let's move into the tactical manual. How do we prevent a total breakdown and actually apply this in a chaotic, modern office environment? First, we need to talk about that 90-minute container.
Right.
We want to be clear based on the research. 90 minutes isn't some magical, inflexible law of physics.
No, not at all. The literature shows the high-intensity cognitive bout usually ranges anywhere from 70 to 110 minutes, depending heavily on the individual, how well they slept, and the complexity of the task. The 90-minute block is just a highly defensible, realistic, ergonomic interface for our biology. It's a scaffolding that respects your natural fatigue dynamics.
What actually happens to our bodies if we ignore that scaffolding? Like, if we're on a tight deadline, we just chug another energy drink, grit our teeth, and push right through the trough.
You severely risk developing what researchers call Ultradian stress syndrome. When you constantly override your natural need for a 15-minute recovery, your body has to compensate somehow. It masks your natural fatigue by flooding your system with adrenaline and stress hormones just to keep you upright.
You're basically running on fumes and panic.
Exactly. And over time, this constant overriding leads to a profound breakdown of your autonomic nervous system. You become highly irritable, your air rate skyrockets, your immune system dips, and you experience severe physiological strain. You end up in that exact wired but tired state we talked about at the beginning because you're forcing your body to run on its emergency reserves all day long.
To avoid that catastrophic burnout, we need actual biological reset protocols. And taking a break doesn't mean switching from your heavy work tab to a social media tab or reading the news. You're still demanding high visual and cognitive processing from your brain. The sources gave us 3 specific science-backed protocols for recovering between cycles. Let's break down how to actually do them. The first is non-sleep deep rest, or NSDR.
NSDR includes practices like yoga nidra. It involves taking 10 to 20 minutes to engage in conscious relaxation. You aren't sleeping, you're awake, but you're systematically shifting your brainwaves back into that restorative alpha or theta state through guided breathing and body scans.
And the effects are pretty immediate, right?
The neurochemical outcome of this is staggering. Studies have shown that a short 20-minute NSDR session can boost baseline dopamine in the brain by up to 65%. It completely refreshes your capacity for motivation and focus for the next 90-minute block.
A 65% dopamine boost just from lying still and breathing is massive. But say you're in a busy office and you can't exactly lie down on the floor under your desk. The second protocol is sensory withdrawal and soft fascination. Our modern world is absolutely packed with what researchers call hard fascination screens, constant Slack alerts, traffic, intense conversations, things that aggressively demand our directed attention.
Right. And to recover from that, your brain desperately needs soft fascination. This means physically disengaging from screens entirely and looking at stimuli that allow your attention to drift naturally without effort. Looking out a window at the wind in the trees, watching clouds move, or looking at a body of water for just 3 to 5 minutes allows that directed attention network to physically replenish itself.
It's giving your eyes and your brain permission to unfocus. And if you're really in a bind, say you're about to walk into a high-stakes meeting and you have 30 seconds, the third protocol is the physiological sigh. This is a very specific breathing technique. A double inhale through the nose, followed by a long, slow exhale through the mouth.
It's incredibly effective.
Yeah.
That double inhale fully inflates the alveoli, the little air sacs in your lungs that often collapse when we're stressed and shallow breathing. Then, the long, extended exhale immediately offloads a massive amount of carbon dioxide.
So it's clearing the lungs.
Yes, but more importantly, it acts as a direct mechanical neural switch. It stimulates the vagal nerve, which instantly lowers your heart rate, drops your circulating cortisol, and triggers parasympathetic dominance. In real time, it pulls you out of a fight-or-flight stress state and puts you back into a calm recovery state.
It's amazing how much control we actually have over our state of mind once we understand the underlying machinery. To synthesize all of this, we aren't meant to fight our bodies. We are meant to play our biology like an instrument. When we align our deep work with our circadian and ultradian rhythms, when we respect the genetic clock ticking in our cells, and when we actually give our brains the pit stops they biologically demand, we completely transform our cognitive output and our well-being.
And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you look at your schedule tomorrow. We talked extensively about how the genetic clock governs these peaks and troughs, but individual chronotypes heavily modulate this timing. Morning larks and night owls hit their peak cortical excitability and their optimal neurochemistry at entirely different times of the day.
That's a huge variable.
It is. If that timing is a hardwired genetic reality written into our cells, is the standard 9 to 5 workday fundamentally biologically incompatible with half the human population's genetic clock?
That is a heavy, incredible realization. Just think about the sheer amount of human potential we might be squandering simply because we're forcing people to work against their DNA.
It really makes you question how we structure society.
It absolutely does. Like, comment, and subscribe to hear more My Mind Mashups deep dives. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective could shape our next deep dive. Are you a morning lark trapped in a night owl schedule, or vice versa? How are you going to implement those 90-minute waves tomorrow? Let us know.
We can't wait to hear what you think.
Find My Mind mashups everywhere you listen: Amazon Music, Audible, Facebook, Pocket Casts, Spotify, TikTok, and YouTube.